Applying public relations theory to practice, bridging academic research with professional challenges and opportunities. The target audience I'm attempting to reach here is Darden, a multi-billion-dollar corporation with over 175,000 employees working across the country in over 2,100 locations under various concepts. In addition to its vast number of employees, Darden influences millions, serving more than 380 million guests per year. According to Forbes, the parent company of Darden, General Mills, gained ownership in 1970 and was publicly held by 1995. Following this transition, one of the concepts, Red Lobster, was declared unsuccessful and dropped from the brand in December of 2013. Still to this day, the general public remains generally unaware of the split, which has resulted in some guest-employee tension. I'm familiar with such disputes as I have been employed under various concepts of Darden over the past 5 years. Improving public relations at Darden stands to benefit the corporation as well as improve communications efficiency at various levels from management to senior level executives. In this project, I will attempt to comprehensively cover the major areas of public relations today and provide a general framework to inform large corporations like Darden of the importance of effective public relations practice. There are 8 concepts under the Darden umbrella: Olive Garden, Longhorn Steakhouse, Bahama Breeze, Cheddar Scratch Kitchen, Yard House, The Capitol Grill, Seasons 52, and Eddie V's. All 8 concepts have different communications teams, different social media managers, different presidents, etc. I believe Darden could benefit from increased collaboration and standardization between the various concepts. In addition, effective public relations will result in fewer instances of conflict among various stakeholders, and it will lower employee turnover rates. Historically, public relations operated in a closed system model. In a closed system, organizations seek little interaction with its environment and stakeholders. In this model, public relations acts more as a barrier between the organization and its public. An open system model is gaining favorability today as it attempts to include stakeholders in decision-making. Open systems promote collaboration among various communication and social science professionals, which is best reflected by this quote from Broome. We need to inform and connect our own work with the best research in communication and human behavior at all system levels. We also need to work harder to connect our work to the larger concerns and how organizations and their stakeholder publics relate in the increasingly complex global community. Excellence theory, the work of J.E. Gruening, began in 1985 as 2 mid-level theories were combined to produce one general theory for research and public relations. The first of these, situational theory, was focused on the public's communication behaviors following an event. This sought to empower public relations as a profession and lead to better organization preparedness for various issues. Organization theory shifted focus from the communication behaviors of publics to the communication behaviors of the organization. Gruening's findings from the organization theory research indicated variables including organizational structure, environment, technology, size, age, culture, worldview, and power structures that all affected the function of PR. This led to an indication of 2 communication patterns formerly referred to as synchronic and diachronic, but later were revised by Gruening into the 4 models of public relations: press, agentry, publicity, public information, two-way asymmetrical, and two-way symmetrical. In a later stage of his research, Gruening extensively studied the symmetrical model, of which he informs. The symmetrical model proposed that individuals, organization, and publics should use communication to adjust their ideas and behavior to those of others rather than to try to control how others think and behave. Overall, excellence theory seeks to inform both public relations research and practice, provide PR's value, and also as an ethical framework. Excellence theory was designed to consider different cultures, economic systems, political systems, media systems, levels of development, and degrees of activist activity. Persuasion and Public Relations, 2 Peas in a Pod by Miller compares persuasion and PR in the following quote: "Effective ethically defensible persuasion and effective ethically defensible public relations are virtually synonymous." Miller asserts that persuasion in public relations is a process of exerting symbolic control in order to gain favorable evaluative predispositions like attitudes that affect behaviors toward the organizations they support. One of the implications of Miller's study is indicating the difference between appealing to an audience's sense of reason and appealing to an audience's sense of emotion. Furthermore, that the two could possibly coexist. A quote from Miller is, "The difference between logical and emotional appeals is one of degree, not of kind." An example of this would be Sarah McLachlan in the ASPCA commercials. With competing messages ever prevalent today, audiences are reduced to passive and prone to selective exposure. Two major areas of development identified by Miller are counter-attitudinal advocacy and multiple messages. Counter-attitudinal advocacy emphasizes overcoming resistance to change by asking the audience to participate in discussion. This, in turn, was determined to be more effective in changing attitudes and behaviors over passive techniques. Examples of multiple message and sequential message strategies include the door in the face, foot in the door, and violation of expectations techniques. Hallahan, in 1999, introduces framing theory as an activity to construct individuals' social reality. The major processes of framing include inclusion, exclusion, and emphasis. It should be the responsibility of public relations to be selective in the information they decide to share with the public and to make specific matters most salient. There are 7 models of framing suggested by Hallahan, compiled from numerous definitions including situations, attributes, choices, actions, issues, responsibility, and news. Ideally, PR should shape the way the public perceives situations in a way that reflects both the company and its stakeholders' values. In their 10-year longitudinal analysis, Wright and Hinson indicate that new media types have changed the way that PR is practiced. External publics are seemingly more impacted than internal publics by the shift toward new media. The postmodern perspective insists the ultimate goal may not be working toward agreement and reconciliation between an organization and its publics, but rather toward an embrace of difference and disagreement. That's a quote from Syscheck 2016. This has given way to a new way of understanding problem solving defined as dissensus. Dissensus is focused on the process of communication and does not suggest that practitioners should defend a single perspective. Disagreement can be both informative and productive. This postulates that, so an example of this would be the Chick-fil-A CEO Dan Cathy, who publicly debated same-sex marriage in support of the biblical definition. On a radio show, Cathy referred to those in support of same-sex marriage, some of which are likely Chick-fil-A customers, as possessing a prideful, arrogant attitude. As the topic of same-sex marriage has widely been a hot-button political issue, it came as a surprise that the company's CEO would take such a strong position. The resulting backlash was evident on the company's social media sites, namely Twitter and Facebook. Both advocates and adversaries rallied on the company's sites, debating numerous issues related to both sides of the argument. Following an intense stream of debate, the company stated on Facebook, its culture is to treat every person with honor, dignity, and respect, regardless of their belief, race, creed, sexual orientation, or gender. And that, going forward, our intent is to leave the policy debate over same-sex marriage to the government and political arena. But the result was dissensus. The information gained through social media post-sentiment analysis is invaluable for researchers in understanding public opinions and values. Social media activism has emerged as this new media gains popularity and utilization. Several unique features of digital media and social advocacy include a scale-related change characterized by low transaction costs, increased reach, and giving a voice to those who normally would not have one. This is known as the supersizing effect. An alternative theory, 2.0 theory, on the other hand, assumes that digital technologies change the actual process, that is, public relations strategy and tactics, of organizing and/or participating, a quote from Hahn, 2015. Both levels of theory involving digital social advocacy reduce the need for central organizational leadership, which can be both beneficial and problematic. There is a power law that exists known as the 80-20 rule. 20% of users will account for the vast majority of activity. It Depends by Cancel et al. Proposes that Gruning's original 4 models of PR do not adequately reflect the fluidity or multiplicity of the profession. A continuum is proposed that addresses this concern, indicating that communication oftentimes lies somewhere in the middle of pure conflict and pure cooperation. Likewise, public relations efforts may lie on a similar continuum that ranges from pure advocacy to pure accommodation. In the middle of this continuum are mixed motive games. These games represent interaction in the interest of the organization and external public. In these games, efforts are neither strictly coincidental nor strictly opposed, a quote from Cancel. Rather than advocating for agreement or congruence, mixed motive games seek understanding and accuracy. The importance of contingency here is determining when it is necessary to seek compromise and when it is unnecessary or even inappropriate. Situational crisis communication theory, or SCCT as I will refer to it here, was suggested by Combs in 2010 in Crisis Communication. Crisis communication has evolved from rhetoric and how-to advice based on anecdotes to a social science that is supported by research. Combs identifies 3 phases of crisis, namely pre-crisis prevention and preparation phase, crisis response phase, and the post-crisis learning phase. The 3 phases can be delineated by 2 categories of application: 1, managing information, and 2, managing meeting. SCCT has proposed 4 types of crisis response strategies: deny, diminish, rebuild, and bolster. In any case, public safety is the primary concern of PR during a crisis. How the public receives an organization during crisis is based on the organization's pre-existing reputation, perceived responsibility for the crisis, and intensifiers like a history of crisis and prior relationships. For years, a standard for measurement and evaluation of public relations has been debated, and still to this day, scholars disagree on many of the terms intended to definitively measure the value of PR. Historically, public relations largely focused on their efforts for proof of value. We'll refer to these as outputs. Outputs of public relations include AVEs, such as the amount of space an article takes up in a publishing, and reach. The issue with using vanity metrics, such as likes, is that they do not accurately reflect the value of PR, much of which is intangible. However, professionals are continuously pressured to provide their value and as a result present outdated systems of measurement. Outcomes of public relations are increasingly difficult to measure as they seek to identify the behavioral change of individuals as a result of public relations efforts. It is also important to note that the lack of standardization is due to cultural variations in definition based on differing values. In the meantime, a group of scholars has convened to offer the Barcelona Principles as a guideline of what to do and what not to do when measuring PR. The principles are not intended as a strict set of rules, rather as a starting point intended to be built upon. Of particular importance in the Barcelona Principles, according to Watson, are setting reasonable objectives and benchmarks to identify your success. In her work toward an ethical framework for advocacy in PR, Edgett determines the first step in advocacy in PR is to determine whether or not the organization or cause seeking your advocacy is worthy of an advocate. The PRSA Code of Ethics has 6 professional values: advocacy, honesty, expertise, independence, loyalty, and fairness. The role of public relations is twofold. Public relations' first role is as a counselor. As counselor, persuasion is the primary purpose. The advocate owes his or her first allegiance to the client or employer, a quote from Edgett, 2002. The second role of public relations is to ensure ethical practices as an advisor. As an advisor, public relations aims for objective observations and analysis of the client's or employer's situation and prescription of solutions, another quote from Edgett. While public relations has an obligation towards their client, they have an overriding obligations towards society that they have to fulfill. Waters and Ott compiled a list of definitions for corporate social responsibility and identified several recurring themes. They stated, corporate social responsibility involves voluntary action above and beyond what is required by law, and that they reflect a company or organization's voluntary efforts to improve society. It is critical that stakeholders are made aware of CSR efforts. If CSR communication is not perceived as being highly relevant to the organization's expertise, perceived fit may be low. If the public believes the organization is engaging in CSR for self-serving purposes, credibility is reduced while skepticism rises. In order to reduce instances of skepticism, a third-party endorsement such as the media or field expert is considered more trustworthy than directly communicating. The goals of CSR align with the goals of nonprofit organizations. Both aim to serve public interest through the distribution of goods or services. However, CSR has a very different reputation in the nonprofit sector. Potential outcomes of CSR include increased profit or donations, increased levels of volunteerism, more positivity in the workplace, increased media coverage for a reduced cost, and better public image. The type of media channel CSR is communicated through also makes a difference. Surprisingly, in the corporate sector, the preferred means of CSR communication are company-controlled. The top 3 means being 1, local stores, 2, the company site, and 3, promotional events. Schreier-Mesh asserts that while globalization has been viewed as a recent phenomenon, this is hardly the case. The newest era of globalization as of the 21st century is typically referred to in an economic context. in a quote from Schirmesh, to denote the removal of trade barriers facilitating the flow of goods, services, and labor across national borders. Schirmesh also importantly noted that globalization is not the same as westernization. A brief publication by Jane, Moya, and Moyeda compiled all the available research on international PR and identified major themes and trends in the field. The study showed a recent increase in the amount of international PR publications available, as well as an apparent lack of collaboration among professionals worldwide. Factors to consider in theory and practice are political ideology, economy, cultural values, and traditions, as well as technological infrastructure when trying to get inside of a different culture. In my opinion, the most important aspect of any organization lies in its leadership and level of employee engagement. Meng, Berger, Gower, and Heyman conducted research involving mid to senior level public relations executives. In their research, Meng et al. Sought to determine what approaches are most effective in leadership, as well as what qualities make a great leader. Their research yielded 4 main approaches to determine effective leadership. 1, the trait approach, which emphasizes the leader's attributes such as personality, motives, values, and skills. This approach indicates there is no guaranteed list of traits that make a leader effective, as well as disregards the situational nature of leadership. 2, the behavioral approach focuses on what leaders actually do and the consequences of such actions. 2 types of behaviors were identified: 1, task-oriented behaviors, and relationship-oriented behaviors. The former represents the day-to-day operations, while the latter reflects mutually beneficial relationships between the leaders and followers, characterized by support and respect. 3, the situational approach acknowledges attributes and behaviors of both leaders and subordinates, as well as the nature of the external environment. The final approach is transformational. This perspective is concerned with emotions, values, ethics, and long-term relationships, as well as followers' motives, needs, and satisfaction, a quote from Meng et al. The transformational approach has contributed to our current understanding of the complexity and dynamic processes involved in leadership. Success in communicating leadership roles depends on the type of leadership style being practiced and understanding the various elements involved that affect what style is most effective in what situation. Employee engagement, as described by Meng, can be measured by the employee's level of positive affectivity and their level of physiological empowerment. Positive affectivity is characterized by levels of attention, absorption, dedication, participation, vigor, enthusiasm, excitement, and pride in one's role. Physiological empowerment refers to an employee's sense of competence or self-efficacy, control, autonomy, meaningfulness, and influence. High turnover rates are associated with lower levels of employee engagement. The hospitality industry has one of the highest turnover rates. In 2016, the turnover rate in the hospitality industry was over 70%, according to restaurant.org. This should be a major area of concern for leaders in the industry, because when employees are more engaged, they generally will perform better. Rollins, 2008, defines transparency as being more visible, opposed to its literal definition of being invisible. For public relations to be transparent on behalf of an organization, they must communicate truthfully. To do this, they must disseminate all information they are legally able. Transparency is different from disclosure. Disclosure permits releasing all of the information. By doing this, they attempt to bury any relevant evidence that could posit the organization in a negative light. This is not the ethically responsible thing to do. Rollins suggests 3 measures for organizational reputation and transparency. They are 1, integrity, 2, respect for others, and 3, openness. These measures yielded 4 dimensions of transparency, namely participation, substantial information, accountability, and secrecy, which is a reversed item factor. Secrecy is reflected by a lack of openness or an attempt to keep secrets or present half-truths. On the other hand, authenticity is to be true to one's identity. Organizations often adopt a corporate identity, and it is visible in marketing techniques. Authenticity is subjective and contextual. A quote from Moyeda says, "Authenticity claims reflect the life experiences and aspirations of a society's group. Authenticity is meant to convey an organization's core value and tradition. Intrapersonal authenticity refers to an organization's internal feelings and identity, while intrapersonal authenticity refers to how they are perceived collectively." Darden should observe the following takeaways for public relations. Persuasion and framing of situations directly affects stakeholders' perceptions. Digital media is growing, as well as the use of microblogs such as and as such should be considered when detailing communication efforts. Crisis protocol and response strategy should be contingent upon the various elements of the situation. There is still lack of consensus in defining measurement in PR, but benchmarking and setting objectives should help structure the evaluation process. Ethical public relations requires treating individuals as ends in themselves, never as means only. Corporate social responsibility should reflect the values of the organization to reduce motive skepticism. There is a need for collaboration among international PR agents. Various ideologies affect perceptions. Effective leadership is derived from experiences, and transparency and authenticity are fundamental concepts of ethical communication. With the information provided in this presentation, Darden could increase employee engagement and reduce the turnover rate. Collaboration between concepts would surely benefit communications efficacy, and in order to be an effective leader, one should have a breadth of experiences for reference. Thank you for your time.